Today, I'll be going over my thoughts of the ranged M plus meta in 9.2. Before we begin, I would just like to say that about 97% of my viewers aren't subscribed. So if you're watching this video and you aren't subscribed, please consider hitting the subscribe button. It really helps me out. Also, hit the like button if you know the content. Alright, so before we begin, we're going to start this off with the little disclaimer I do all the time. This tier list is not for like the top 100 M plus teams worldwide or whatever. This is just kind of ranking all the range specs relative to each other. At like, you know, high end levels of play, but not like top like 1% levels of play. As well, you can and will complete any key, any comment that you want to do on any of these specs. The only thing is that you know, some of them will be easier, some of them will be tougher on, but anything on this list can and will do all the content in the game. This is just kind of ranking them relative to each other. That being said, we are going to start with Affliction Lock. So Affliction Warlock, personally, I think is probably one of the worst specs. The issue with them really is that their shield set doesn't really bring anything at all. Mythic Raptor's damage is 15%, but a lot of your damage and keys comes from Seed, and that's their 2 set. And then it also extends all their dots as well. Their 4-piece makes Drain Soul and Shadow Bolt give you like free cast of Mythic Rapture, but the big thing is that you don't use Drain Soul or Shadow Bolt in your rotation at all, or as much in AoE, and you don't really use Mythic Rapture that like often because most of your damage is Sow the Seeds. Its burst AoE is still going to be fairly alright with the Seed build, but like you're not going to do anywhere near as much single target with Seed build as you will, and you're also going to just be doing a much lower burst AoE compared to a lot of other classes. And you don't really have that great utility for you know, for M+. You can't really set up your dots effectively because everything's just going to die. Overall, I think they're definitely one of the lower ends of ranged in M+. Now I'm going to go for Arcane. Arcane I think is going to go in B. Arcane has pretty good burst every minute or so. Outside of that, it's really bad sustained damage, but inside their burst, they can kind of annihilate any target in attack pretty quickly. They have really good, you know, mage utility and keys. The only downside is that they don't have the cheat death Fire has, and they don't have the slows that Frost has, and are slightly and fairly low sustain outside of cooldowns. Their tier set, which makes Touch of the Magi kind of deal more damage, last longer, and give you mana, kind of just feeds into the big burst window cooldown thing. So I think they're going to have like a decent enough placement because of this just kind of really high burst cooldown and kind of annihilate a few targets in a pack in like a few seconds. But outside of that, they do low damage, and they also could potentially suffer from like threat issues where they rip threat on like one big target. And because of that, I think you're not really going to see them in like the high tiers of play, but they're going to be like fairly decent. All right, next is Beastmaster. Beastmaster going to have C. This one I could be wrong about. I think they could potentially go into B. But the main factor that is that their tier set. So their tier set right now is basically only giving you single target damage. You get crit off of Kill Command with Frenzy, and then you also get like Cobra Shot damage whenever you crit with Kill Command. And that doesn't really lend anything at all to their AoE abilities. Now, I recorded this on the 26th of February, and Blizzard yesterday said that they're going to incorporate some kind of AoE into Beast Mastery's rotation from the tier set. So depending on how it changes things, this could move up. But I think that, you know, they're fairly squishy. Although they do have good leech, and they have turtle and all that. They also bring stun and intimidation, and they also bring lust. But I think that Beast Mastery is outclassed by other specs of Hunter. I also think they're outclassed by other range specs. And without their AoE damage being buffed from the tier set, I don't think they're going to be able to climb. But if that buff is significant enough, I could see them moving up to possibly B. If it's crazy, it could be A tier, but I think B with tier set changes would be more likely. Next, we're going to go Balance. Balance is going to put kind of the upper end of B tier. The reason for this is that while Balance has quite strong burst, Venthyr did get nerfed. And the big issues still remain in the fact that Starfall can't be stacked and has a cooldown, which means they have no effective AoE spender. Before the nerfs to Kyrian, I think they could have been A tier because of the Kyrian buff, but now you're going to be playing Venthyr and just being a worse version of last tier. Their tier set kind of gives you the 2-piece summons a pillar that at 25% effectiveness, a Fury of a Loon pillar, and those don't do that much AoE damage, especially at 25% less. And then the 4-piece makes all your stuff cost less, makes your spenders cost less. But the big issue is that they still can't stack that AoE damage, and because of that, I think that B tier is kind of a fair placement for them. If that would have changed, I think they could move up, but I don't think that's going to change. So I think they're going to stay in B tier. Other than that, they do bring good utility. They bring a stun. They bring trees. They bring Earth Souls, which does help. So I think B tier is fair. Damage not the best. Utility fairly great. So I think B can be there. Next, Demonology. I'm going to put Demonology in A. Demonology actually brings fairly good AoE because of their tier set. Basically, their 2-piece summons an extra dog whenever they call Dreadstalkers, and the 4-piece has a chance to summon an imp, and that imp deals damage to Implosion whenever you do AoE. So because of this, they actually have fairly good AoE with their Dreadlash build, as well as with kind of the 1-minute burst that it'll come to me. 1-minute burst that Demonic Tyrant brings. And they interact really well with haste, which can be good with the new seasonal affixes. And they have fine utility. I guess it's the same utility as Aff, but it's not super amazing. But I think their damage is fairly good, and it's a good profile. So I think that A is fair for them. They also can just blast and single target on bosses, which can be important. Destro. I think Destro is better than Demonology. I think they're quite a good M+ kind of cooldown thing. Not cooldown thing. Profile. Havoc lets them cleave into 2 targets, which is really good. And then their tier set is kind of the reason why they're valuable at all. So the 2-piece makes every kind of 10 soul shards you get a free rain of fire, and then whenever the 4-piece makes you summon an infernal, basically a blasphemy, which gives you soul shards. It gives you rain of chaos, which means that eventually you can kind of just chain rain of fires together and only cast that. It's really fun and can do kind of insane AoE. Potentially one of the highest AoE of all the range characters. The reason I'm not putting this in S, and I believe it's top of A, is that their single target is pretty terrible outside of this, and their utility isn't amazing. They do bring Soulstone and B-Reses, which are more important in dungeons because you have them less often. But I think that because they're just such kind of a big AoE niche, kind of the same as Windwalker, kind of the same as Survival Hunter, and they bring low single target, I think A is fair for that. Next, we're going to Elemental Shaman. Elemental Shaman, I'm also going to put up in A tier. I think I'm going to put it right there. Elemental Shaman has one of the strongest 1-minute bursts with Stormkeeper. As well, Seeds of Rampant Growth and Echoes of Great Sunder and really work really well together, and their tier set leads to really high uptime of Storm Elemental, kind of working lava burst back into their AoE rotation. Because of this high uptime of Storm Elemental, I think they're going to get fairly good DPS as long as you can get pack to pack relatively easily and just kind of chain out those chain lightnings and then just start going hand with Earthquakes and with Sorg and whatever. They also bring Lust, which is very important. I think Lust is going to come from Resto Shaman for the most part. I think it's less important in this tier that your DPS brings it, but it's still fairly good. They also have Tremor and Cap Totem, which are good. Tremor is very useful on the first boss in Mists. There's also just random fears everywhere else. Cap Totem is really good for an AoE stun. They have a Curse spell, and they have Earth Ellie. The thing with Earth Ellie, and I think this is less of an issue in M+, is it in Raid, because you won't have 100% Earth Elemental uptime, is that Earth Ellie will take up your Storm Elemental, which is bad. So that kind of neuters their best defensive a little bit. But because I don't think it'll have as much uptime, I don't think it'll be as big of a deal. Likewise, they have one of the best kicks in the game. Wind Shear is insane. It's a really short cooldown, really long range kick. And it's just crazy that only Shamans get this, but I guess it makes sense. But it's just crazy, right? It's a crazy kick. So I think their overall, their utility package is pretty good. Their damage package is pretty good. They'll bring higher single target now because of their tier set, and they'll bring really good AoE because of double legendary and their tier set. So I think A is good for them. Next, we're going to do Fire Mage. I think Fire Mage is going in B tier with Arcane. The reason for this, and the reason I'm not putting them as high as, let's say, Frost Mage, is that I think their window is more bursty, and even in that burst, it's not as good other options. I think fire is fairly unkillable, both with Cauterize and with their ice block, and then you also run come to me, Dreamweaver for Pod Tender. They bring good AoE with Flame Strike and Flame Patch. The issue is that outside of the cooldowns, they do nothing. During cooldowns, they do really good damage. Not not anything compared to some like Destro chain stuff, but they do good enough damage that they can put them in B. But outside of their cooldowns, they do almost nothing, which is really bad. They bring Dragon Breath, which is really impactful, actually. I think one of the reasons why they're one of the better of the B tier specs, because Dragon Breath has a really strong ability on a really short cooldown that gets even shorter with Night Fae. But because their single target is meh and their AoE is tied only to their burst cooldown, and even for what it is, it's not amazing within that burst cooldown. I think B is fair. Now they are unkillable, which does matter, and they bring really good mage utility. But I think that mage utility is going to be better brought by Frost, which I'm putting in S. Frost is just crazy. Now they did get nerfed compared to what they were in 9.2, and I think that if this was an overall tier of all the classes instead of just range, I think Frost would be down in A. But because I don't think it's better than some melee, but I think that it is better than all of the other ranged. The nerfs, Blizzard and Frozen Orb by 12%, and then Blizzard also does half the CDR for Frozen Orb every time it ticks now. But their set bonus has really good utility in AoE because of it summons a Comet Storm basically every 20 seconds. And then whenever you get hit by a Comet Storm, they take 2% extra damage up to 10% every time, which is basically 10% extra frost damage from all your abilities and in an AoE, which is really good. They bring a slow, which is really good. They're unkillable with 2 ice blocks, which is really good. And they just bring a really good constant kind of damage profile that's available for them. I think that Icy Veins uptime will be about the same. You might get less because of the Frozen Orb CDR nerf, but in enough, like, in large enough AoE pools, which is where they excel and where you generally want to have them, they're going to have Orb up fairly often, which won't really impact them. Likewise, the new affix with the CDR is going to help them out quite a bit with that, because it lets them get even more CDR when otherwise it wouldn't be possible. I think Frost just is one of the best, especially with its AoE slow and all the utility it has. Next, Marksmanship Hunter, I'm putting that in A tier. I think they have really good burst. And their tier set is actually like really good for AoE. The 2 pieces is just a 30% AoE increase because of trick shots, and then the 40%, the 4 piece gives you more trick shots passively whenever you spend focus. So within volley, within true shot, within Kyrian arrow, within Kyrian arrow, they're going to do amazing damage, which is really, really good. I think the only thing holding them back from being higher in A tier or even S tier is the fact that they are so they're the squishiest of the hunter specs. They have one of the worst defensive abilities in the game. Survival Fittest is 20% DR for 6 seconds on a 3-minute cooldown, which is just crazy how bad that is. They bring Lust, but for them to bring Lust, they have to have a pet out, and having a pet out means they do less damage. Likewise, they don't have the leech that other hunters have access to because of this, because the leech is tied to a pet. But I think, but they do bring other good stuff, such as Freezing Trap can work. Bursting Shot is a nice knockback, and they have decent mobility with Disengaging Cheetah. They also have Blinding Shot, which is a good route baseline, so that's important. But because they're so squishy, I think that they're stuck kind of in the low A tier. But because of how much damage they have, I could see this kind of moving up if that happens, because during their cooldowns they just do insane damage. Marksmanship is pretty fun. And last, we're going with Shadow Priest. Now, Shadow Priest, to me, I think is a C tier spec, mostly because of their nerfs. They have an amazing tier set. Basically, your Devouring Plague and Searing Nightmare give you a chance to grant you Dark Thoughts whenever you use Dark Thoughts, which is like a free Mind Blast. You get a Shadow that does AoE damage. But that got nerfed by 40%, and their Necrolord Legendary also got nerfed by 40%. I think they had huge potential like outside of that. I'm actually going to bump them up above Beastmastery for now, especially in like larger uncapped pulls. But because they got nerfed, I think it's putting them down in C tier. Now, realistically, I think if these nerfs are kind of walked back a little bit, I could see it moving up into B. If the nerfs are walked back all the way, I think they're going to be in A when you pull large enough. But generally, I think that because of these changes and nerfs to the tier set, Shadow is kind of dropping down in the rankings and loses a lot of its viability. Likewise, its toolkit for AoE is, sorry, it's not toolkit for AoE. It's utility toolkit is fairly decent. They have disease dispel. They have an offensive dispel. They have mass dispel. They have a vampiric embrace if you need it. They have the stand buff, and they have really good crowd control with mind control, second scream, and then undead or bomb. They have a really bad kick, which is a thing that's keeping them down. I think it has the highest cooldown in the game for a kick at I think 45 seconds without the talent or something like that. So it's super long, and it doesn't have the benefit of boomies, where boomies is like an AoE silence. So I think for these reasons, especially with them being a little squishy because they're priests and clothies, and there's kind of nerfs to their overall damage, I think putting them in C tier is fair. But if these nerfs are walked back, I could see them moving up. Okay, so that's kind of the last of the tier list videos I'll be doing for this patch. I'm going to check up on them kind of later on down in the patch when the meta's been figured out more and trying to like figure out what happened there. But let me know what you think. Comment down below if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. And I really just want to thank everybody for watching these videos. Getting over 200 subs is kind of just crazy, and I'm excited to see where this goes. I have some good content planned in the future, and thank you, everybody.